Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for having me here today and for giving up your Saturdays to come and learn a bit more about gynae cancer and also the Survivors Teaching Students program. So I'll start off by telling you a little bit about myself and my journey, and then how I became involved with ANZGOG and Survivors Teaching Students. So basically, it all started when I was 21 years old. I was living my dream of a working holiday over in London. And I was working full-time, going to the gym and travelling as much as I could. And here you can see a photo of me and my tiny dog, Henry, in Italy. So we were having a great old time. And I, at the time, was experiencing 3 subtle symptoms, which I didn't know could be serious. I had fatigue, which I put down to my busy lifestyle. I had bloating, which I put down to my lactose intolerance, and occasional abdominal pain, which I thought was just my monthly period pain. It wasn't until a few months later that these symptoms became more and more frequent and more intense. One day, I actually woke up and was vomiting from the pain in my abdomen, and I actually finally called in sick to work and went and saw my GP. My GP looked me up and down, thought I was healthy too, and with vomiting in the morning, assumed I was pregnant. She did a pregnancy test and it was negative, did another one just to make sure, still negative, and decided that I had appendicitis. She sent me straight to the emergency room, and basically I got there and they said, yep, looks like appendicitis. I went into surgery that night to have my appendix removed. I was nervous, kind of excited because it was a bit of a random adventure to be having. And I FaceTimed my mum and dad back in Brisbane and said, I'm in hospital, but it's only appendicitis, don't worry. I woke up the next morning, literally lifted up my sheet, looked for my surgery scar. Yep, had a surgery scar. Everything must be fine. I can go home and start recovering and get back to work. It wasn't until the doctors came around to do their rounds, and they were just acting so strangely and just so kind of standoffishly. And they told me that they'd referred me on for a scan because when they opened me up, they couldn't even see my appendix. It was just covered in, at the time, cysts. And they told me to get this MRI to just check out, the extent of these cysts. And so I went home sort of a bit confused, thinking I might have an ovarian cyst, or wasn't really sure what was going on. But I went for the MRI, and at the time I didn't know that they'd actually taken a biopsy and a CA-125 blood test. I had returned to work and was on my way back to the tube stop, and I had this phone call, and it was after hours, and this nurse was actually calling me from her personal mobile phone, and I thought, that's strange, that seems quite, out of the usual. So she called me up and said, your results are in, can you come back first thing tomorrow morning? And then I said, oh, okay, sure, thinking, giving results in person is probably a good idea, not over the phone like Jane had. And then I hang up. She calls me back. Oh, I forgot to mention, can you bring a loved one in with you? My heart just sunk. I thought, oh gosh, what's going on here? So my sister and I went in the next morning and was told the bad news, ovarian cancer, and the MRI had shown it had spread significantly. So I was then diagnosed with stage 3C, advanced low-grade serous ovarian cancer, and it had spread, completely throughout my womb. It had attached itself to my bowels. It was up all through my abdomen, alongside my liver, just everywhere. My gynaecologist actually drew a map of the human anatomy and showed me where all the cancer was, and it was not a pretty picture. It was just everywhere. So I personally kind of went straight into sort of fight mode, I suppose, and sort of said, what are we going to do about this? And I made the decision to stay in London and have all of my treatment there because, one, I didn't want to just pack up and move home and give up my dream of living overseas, and 2, I had access to Avastin, the drug that we were talking about earlier, that hadn't quite been approved in Australia but was approved in the UK. So I went through huge amounts of treatment, 6 rounds of chemotherapy, an 11-hour debulking surgery, which included a full radical hysterectomy, and a stoma as well, because the cancer had attached so severely to my large bowel. I was lucky enough to go into remission for about a year, which was not expected when I was first diagnosed. They kind of thought that I could potentially only have months left to live if the treatment hadn't been successful. So during that sort of year of remission, my UK visa expired, and my sister and I decided to move to Canada. I'd only been there for about 2 or 3 months, and then the cancer came back, and this time they did say it's incurable. And so I decided to move back home. You know, can't put my family through more cancer treatment overseas. So I moved home and begun treatment locally in Brisbane. And that's when I found out about ANZGOG, because my medical oncologist put me onto a clinical trial. And at first, going into a clinical trial, I wasn't really sure what it would be, whether I'd be a lab rat or, you know, what it would involve, but it was amazing. I had access to drugs that I, you know, normally wouldn't have been able to have under the PBS, and I've had my life extended by many years through being on 2 different ANZGOG clinical trials, and so I can't thank ANZGOG enough and my medical oncologist for that, because how do you say thank you to someone for keeping you alive? There's no thanks big enough. And that's sort of how I've become involved with advocacy work. So in Canada, I got in touch with Ovarian Cancer Canada and actually did a survivors teaching students session and training over there. And when I came back to Australia, I was disappointed to know that it didn't exist here. So I was thrilled when ANZGOG had, you know, announced that they were bringing it to Australia and received a government grant to do so. So I put my hand up straight away and said, yep, I want to be involved in this program, please. So I was part of the first presentation in Sydney, which was really exciting. And then now I'm the regional coordinator for Brisbane. So I'm looking to recruit anyone who would be interested in the program. And basically, from a survivor's perspective, participating in the program, I would say the first thing would be most people would probably be scared to, 1, open up about their stories, and 2, the thought of public speaking can be terrifying. So my sort of advice or words of comfort would be that participating in a program like this is just so rewarding. Being able to share your story and what you've been through is incredibly therapeutic and empowering. You feel like you're taking control back from the disease and actually giving back and having a voice. It's not just this crazy world going around you with, you know, medical terms and appointments. It's something that you can get involved in and give back and share your story and make a difference of what you've been through. And I used to be terrified of public speaking, but having something to talk about that's not just a work presentation or a school or uni project, something that's so personal and so important to you, the words just come out naturally, I've found, personally anyway. And it's just, yeah, such a good program. And as Helen said, you can just make such a difference, as you can see with all the statistics about medical professionals. And sorry, this is a photo of me during treatment. Forgot about my slideshow. And then now being an ambassador for ANZGOG. And yeah, I just encourage everyone to join the program of survivors teaching students and get involved. And please come and talk to me if you're interested. Or for those of you online, please get in touch via social media or the ANZGOG website. Thank you.